Hey everyone, welcome to another G News update. Well, what a shocker Tama Potaka was on Q&A this morning. Talk about evading the question. Jack Tame had to continually say back to my question while Tama Potaka kept on evading the question, kept on saying, well, look, what I want to talk about is this, and what I will say is that, but not answer the question. And when it came to homelessness, the question really was, were your policies and stricter rules around the eligibility criteria to get an emergency house one of the main factors in the explosion of homelessness that providers have been reporting and that reports have shown have happened that coincided pretty much identically with the implementation of those stricter rules? So there's not much doubt about it. I mean, it really is the case that the policies of the government have contributed to an explosion in homelessness, and they are reaching around to find other reasons, a range of other reasons that may have also contributed to a rise in homelessness. But the big one is marked by that proximity to the timing of the government harsh eligibility rules in order to actually lower and reduce the number of people on a list so that they could boast about it, so they could celebrate homelessness. Ah, look, we've reduced the number of people living in emergency accommodation, and call it a moral outrage that people were moved into a house off the street or out of their cars during a pandemic. For Christ's sake, I mean, for goodness sake. For goodness sake, I mean, that's kind of the moral outrage that's going on here. Well, Potaka was a complete disgrace, really, on many topics, including not knowing what he thought about why he disagrees with health experts that the smoking laws would result in thousands of deaths, particularly Maori people who smoke, and not knowing why he disagreed, but just maintaining he disagreed anyway, and that he hadn't really given a topic that involves thousands of people dying very much thought, really. It just wasn't really that much of a thing to Tama Potaka. So there was that, and you know the rest of the sad and sorry story, kind of boasting about the way that commercial fishing is going to happen in the high protection zones inside the Hauraki Gulf as probably the brightest and best example of the kind of things that Tama Potaka is doing around conservation. I mean, it's appalling, isn't it? It's just a disgrace. And, you know, they keep fronting this like the entire nation is thick and don't get the fact that the deceptions are see-through and everyone can see the bullshit that he's trying to spin, all the evasion. But good on Jack for like persisting with my question and bringing this guy down and getting him to admit that one of the big reasons that homelessness has exploded in the report that he is sitting on and hiding from the public is his policies. So he shouldn't be celebrating the increase in homelessness that his policies have caused. And of course, this government have no intention of changing their policies. They had to be dragged to admit this. But then later in the morning, we also saw a change of clothing from Christopher Luxon, Chris Bishop, and from Nicola Willis. These guys all showed up wearing their high visors and helmets to talk about infrastructure and how there's about $6 billion worth of infrastructure projects that are going to occur before Christmas. And they wanted to highlight this because even though those projects were happening anyway and there was no need for an announcement, something's pretty damn well desperate going on in the National Party, and they need to kind of appear in front of cameras. They like to change clothing. The wardrobe's important. From the Nema clothing with the collar turned up to look cool and manly, when you turn up 2 weeks late to a flood zone and you're too late and all you bring is uncertainty, the main thing is you're wearing your Nema jacket next to Mark Mitchell and you're kind of delivering this uncertainty to people that you just don't have the money for this, but you've got $12 billion for defence. You've just stolen $12.8 billion from low-paid working women from their pay equity claims. And, you know, there's money to go around, but not to flood victims, not to people in the South Island. I mean, come on, like, you know, get real. This is about wearing clothing and putting your Nema jacket on and showing up for a photo opportunity and then getting the hell out of Dodge and changing wardrobe again. And this morning, the Prime Minister stepped up. And what do you have to say? Well, he had to say that it was really important, you know, for the creation of jobs, that we got on with infrastructure, and that if we were to actually use the public balance sheet, which would actually cost New Zealand a lot less in the long run to actually build things, well, there would be some temporary delays, and we can't have that. So we've just got to get on with it and go private and spend a lot more, go reckless, just, privatisation, private everything. And then he backed off, and we had Willis step up and read with her fake eyelashes on from her speech, which basically said bugger all. And finally, they let Chris Bishop step up to the microphone. And Bishop was asked the question whether or not there'd really been any tangible success or outcomes from the hugely hyped Investor Summit earlier this year. And Bishop could only name 2 projects that had actually resulted from all of that hype. Now, remember that there was $6 trillion in the room, and that was all over the news. It was all over every headline. Atlas, Luke, Thomas, the guys at TVNZ, all they could talk about was the $6 trillion in the room. But the only real outcomes were kind of happening anyway. There was a project about a 4-lane motorway going up north that was happening anyway, that the people that were bidding for this were already going to sign up. Didn't need an investment summit for this to go ahead. But Bishop was like, remember, they attended the summit. So, here's this kind of like conflation between the attendance at the summit and the fact that they were signing up to a project they were already going to sign up for. So yeah, he made a big deal about how there were 3 players who all went to the summit, but they were all going to sign up anyway to that project. And then there was Tainui, who National basically almost didn't want to have at the summit, but because of their determination, they managed to get together and work on a logistics hub project, and they've made progress, but through their own efforts against the wishes of the National Party at the time. But now National are taking credit for that. There was also a lot of credit stealing when it came to building classrooms, because as you all know and know very well, it was Labor who was the architect of modular classroom design. But now you've got Chris Bishop and Nicola Willis boasting about how because of our smart National Party modular building designs, we're able to build faster and better and cheaper, and we're bringing more value to you. But that's a Labor idea. So the stealing credit carries on as per usual in this country, and the challenge isn't really there from the media. No one says, hey, that's a Labor idea again. You're just borrowing from their initiatives. But never mind. Look, these guys are desperate. They're in power, and the media are a bit weak at challenging them at times. Unlike Jack Tame, who does an excellent job of keeping these guys to the question, back to the question, back to the question, back to the question, until that question is finally answered by these people who don't want to answer those questions. And why don't they want to answer questions? Well, because the story that lies behind what they're really doing would see us drive them out of town. They wouldn't be re-elected if they told the truth, and they can't actually tell the truth. So they've got to try and sidestep it, distract us, move away to a different topic. Like in homelessness, there's a range of factors. Well, it's your policy that's actually created an explosion amongst those factors. So stop talking about all the other factors like mental health or the cost of living crisis, and let's look at your policies and what contribution it has made. Yeah, sure, there are a few other factors. There always be at the margins, but the main factor is National tightened up the rules for access, and all those people that could actually, 9 out of 10 of them could go and get an emergency house, no problem with WINZ. Suddenly, there was a big problem, and it was really hard to do, and that is the undeniable truth and the fact of the matter that is trying to be avoided and not talked about by Chris Bishop, by Nicola Willis, by Christopher Luxon, and especially by Tama Potaka. Now, I just want to talk a little bit again after that unnecessary announcement this morning about things that were happening anyway, kind of more of a dress-up and promotional announcement about infrastructure projects. There was also this stuff still hanging around in the air about the way in which these politicians in the government at the moment have been abusing people. And as you know, Tory whānau was abused quite badly by David Seymour. He kind of implied really that there was some bad behaviour there in a press conference that he was running while he was acting PM, and Luxon was on another Photoshop tour. And there was also this whole syndrome, this derangement syndrome thing that David Seymour had borrowed and copied, because he wasn't an original thinker, that he'd copied from Trump, actually, and brought to New Zealand in an imported culture war to New Zealand in order to, create outrage and rage on the right so that people with small brains would be angry. And what he basically did is he said that some of our most distinguished scholars suffered from a derangement syndrome. But when he talked about it, he said there's this curious syndrome. He didn't actually acknowledge that it was called a derangement syndrome in his own wording. And he rejected the idea that he'd said that anyone was deranged, because it was a curious syndrome, not a derangement syndrome. So you can see that he was full of shit, basically, and trying to kind of wiggle out. But he knew what he was doing, and what he's basically doing is stirring up division in New Zealand, causing hate and harm and problems, because he's seen that this playbook works for some people who are already a bit resentful and probably underinformed. So there's this abuse going on all the time, and the abuse extends to a lot of males, and males with big, giant egos who like to be in the limelight, who have gone out into media and sought attention one way or another, usually through op-eds. But in the case of Sir Ian Taylor, it was more a case of open letters. An open letter a day keeps the attention on Ian, and it keeps a whole lot of ego feeding and dopamine going around, it would appear. So anyway, as you remember, he appeared recently with Paddy Gower, who was trying to hype up the kind of the clickbait, if you like, around why Sir Ian was surprised at the reaction across New Zealand that he got from his open letter to Jacinda Ardern, mocking and dragging her down and abusing her again, and saying, well, that she was really just about brand management and not about pandemic management or anything else. And in that interview, you may recall that Sir Ian was shocked and horrified that nobody actually spoke about the way in which poverty and that kind of thing actually didn't improve under Jacinda Ardern. But, what Ian missed out was, in fact, something like 7 out of the 9 measures of poverty did improve during the tenure that Jacinda had, during a global pandemic and an economic shock that was a 100-year economic shock. So these were not normal times, and these were not times that were anticipated by anybody when they set forth to do their good work like Jacinda did. So Ian Taylor is not only telling the whole truth, he's not telling the whole truth, he's actually making shit up to some extent here by saying that things are the same without actually kind of really saying what the circumstances really were that led us back to a situation where, thanks to Jacinda, we've actually got measurements, but under national things are far worse. And wouldn't you think that with all of this rubbish going on with Tama Potaka and Chris Bishop and the like, carrying on about a range of factors hidden in a report that they will not release about homelessness, in direct conflict with all of the frontline providers dealing with the real people on the streets and the reports and what they say, the evidence in the reports, that Sir Ian might write one of those open letters to Tama Potaka or to Chris Bishop about poverty if he really gave a shit about it and wasn't just attacking a female in office. Because you know that Jacinda left in a whirl of 50 times the amount of extreme abuse that anybody else in politics was suffering. And recently we've got Tory whānau stepping out of leadership in politics because of this kind of right-wing, usually white male abuse that is whipped up on the right wing of politics. It's such an awful thing to see these political parties contributing to this, along with players in the media hyping it up for attention. So there's a real attack on women in politics at the moment going on. I'm aware that that it's much harder if you're a woman, and it's much harder if you're really in a situation where your skin isn't the white colour, if you like. So we've really got to look at the way that some of these operators and commentators in our media are contributing. And on that particular note, I'd just like to make a mention of my observations that Nicola Willis wears a pink pantsuit. That's an observation of fact because she wears pink pantsuits, she wears blue ones, she wears others. It's not an attack on the wearing of a garment or a style, but it is a fact. And I think it's okay to say something about somebody if it's a fact, like Mark Mitchell. He wears a NEMA jacket whenever he can at a national weather event, that kind of thing. And Chris Bishop, he'll put a hard hat on and a Visa jacket, a high-vis. And Nicola Willis, she wears pantsuits when she does budgets and other announcements like that. So, yeah, those are observations of fact. They're not attacks. So the attack comes when you say that somebody belongs to a derangement syndrome, for actually disagreeing with your regulatory standards bill, that kind of thing. That's an attack on people and their mental well-being or mental health. And that's just absolute abuse. So there is a difference in a line between these kind of things, in my opinion. And that's probably all I really wanted to say. But the key things that I wanted to underline here is inflation is out. CPI inflation figures are out tomorrow. They're expected to be back in the order of 2.8, 2.9%. As inflation rises under Nicola Willis's poor economic management, very bad economic management, the worst economic management we've ever seen, such a terrible recession that she led us into last year, so deep that it was as deep as it had been for over 30 years. This is a really bad finance minister here who lacks economic credibility and who today was basically just dressing up and reciting lines in an unnecessary announcement about infrastructure. These projects that they're talking about, those are about fast-tracking consents. A lot of them are projects that have been declined in the Environment Court because they have seriously bad environmental effects. They will damage the environment severely. And the government just wanted to get around that because they don't value that sort of thing. They just value the short-term profits and their friends and donors that they're kind of working for, a small minority of quite wealthy people at the expense of our environment in this country, which is a beautiful country, but it's being kind of vandalized at the moment by this fast-track consenting, and you're all more aware of that than I am. And so inflation's going up. We've got Tama Pōtaka, a big disaster, evading questions and dancing around things and hiding and concealing data and information from the public in that report. You've got Chris Bishop doing the exact same kind of deceitful and evasive thing, talking about a range of factors and not acknowledging the contribution and damage and harm that this government is doing to our homeless people. We should care more about the people on our streets. We should care more about the policies that put them out there, that don't give them the help they need. We're hearing this lie that people who are rejected can always get help and support from WINZ, but those application rejection rates do not lie. They are being rejected and turfed back out on the street, while Christopher Luxon says you can always get help. And I think that sums it up. I'll just leave it there. Have a wonderful Sunday, and I'll talk to you all again very soon. Have a great day.